lower back has this very strong concave look to it here that I'd be worried about long term in terms of being able to rotate well through the ball. It can put a lot of stress on the lower back. It's not ideal. So just engaging your core to kind of push out that lower back would go a long way. I also would like to see a little bit less knee flex and just generally maybe a little taller, setup position. For example, upper body gets very bent over from the upper portion of your waist. Hands kind of retract inside, and then the knees have a lot of flex. I would love to see this idea cleaned up here, with a little bit less knee flex, for example. So just setting up a little bit taller, getting the upper body a little taller, getting those hands to relax under the shoulders a little better. So matching more the yellow position to the red one, I do believe would go a long way for you. Outside of that, everything else in the setup is fine. Now, in the backswing, we take the club back. Obviously, grips a little bit on the stronger side with the left hand. So that's always going to get that club face a little bit more toe down, kind of matching the spine here. Don't mind this takeaway at all. Left arm a little inside, which is good. No real issues there to the club movement. And then really up until this point, again, a lot of really good. Shoulder tilt is really solid. Pelvic tilt, obviously, because of address is really good. Changes in knee flex. Hands right in the middle of the chest here. A lot of good things going on. Now, when you get to the top, I certainly don't mind the shorter pattern. You mentioned the fact of like a little bit of bigger muscles, getting a little shorter with the arms and all that in the swing. I don't mind that, and I actually don't mind where the hands are too. I believe if you got any deeper than this, to be honest, it would be too deep for a shorter move. If there is anything here, to me, just looks maybe, and this might be the shoes, but looks like there's a lot of weight on the toes of your feet, maybe not so much on the heels. The soles of the heels here looks like it's elevating a little bit. You see kind of that shadow would typically tell me that there's not enough pressure going into the heel of the foot. So maybe something to consider changing long term, but it also might be the shoes. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. The only real concern here for me is just a little too laid off with the club. And in fact, I think this actually matches some of the older stuff we've talked about as well, where club just gets a little too laid off here for my liking. And then from there, usually you'll see a steeper transition, which is very much what happens with you. Right, when that club doesn't set down the line enough, even for a shorter move. Of course, I don't want it ever to get like across the line. I believe that would be too hard to reroute everything in a short amount of time. But when it gets too laid off, oftentimes what happens is from that laid off position, it's really hard to keep the club shallow. And so coming down, you'll see a little bit of a reaction where the shaft tends to steepen some amount. And then obviously as soon as it's coming down steeper, even if it doesn't look actually steep, it's steepening. The direction it's moving is this way. And then from there, your body has to react to it and try to stall out the chest and side bend. That's why through the ball, the hands kind of exit out that way. The left shoulder looks a little jammed up and kind of like closed off here. All of these things are related to the fact that the shaft is steepening and you can't really rotate. Because if you rotate with how the shaft is steepening, it's going to work too far out in front of you. And believe it or not, those pulls would actually get worse. So there's an innate reaction from your body from being too laid off to stall out in order to avoid a pull. And then obviously once you stall out and that left shoulder stays closed off, the hands exit down the target line too much. And then from there, it's just like holding on for dear life. Usually you'll see a very, very vertical release of this shaft here. And typically you'll see a little too much right side bend. So I think side bend is good. I think it can certainly be overdone. And certainly with better players like lower handicaps, it tends to be overdone. So all I would love to see here really, and I actually think this would clean up a lot of your issues, if we just got the club a little bit more down the line, that would preset the forearms in a different position so that in transition, the shaft would actually start to naturally shallow out instead of steepening some amount. And then from there, we would be able to actually get your body to rotate pretty comfortably through the ball. I just don't believe you have the ability to do so right now because the club just gets a little too laid off and steepens a little too much in transition. And then there's a reaction from the chest, side bending and staying closed off to try to make it work and not just hit it left. And that's why the release gets so vertical. It's all kind of correlated there. So if we do some tiny little setup detail changes that I mentioned at the beginning of this, and we just get that club pointed a little bit more down the line, there will be a much different reaction to the shaft and transition shallowing out, and that'll free up your body to do some different good things through the golf ball.